I've got great memories of Morrison's, by the way. I used to live up in Scotland, of course, and you were very well represented in Scotland. And you guys used to be my favorite supermarket. So there we go. Bit of a secret laid bare from the outset. Anyway, Rachel has got a really fine marketing pedigree, quite like no other. She has from organizations such as Barclays, and then moving on to Sainsbury's, and now, of course, at Morrison's. And while at Sainsbury's, she led group marketing communications across Sainsbury's, Argos, and Tu. And prior to that, she launched Future Brands, a venture arm of Sainsbury's commercial team, which saw the supermarket invest in small suppliers. So there we go. Rachel is also a trustee of Missing People, a charity seeking to support over 250,000 adults and young people who go missing each year in the UK. Love to hear a little bit more about that, Rachel, as well. It's just surprising, I think, as a stat, and it's one that I like to dig into. Beyond this, impressively, Rachel actually also has 3 degrees. An MBA with distinction from Imperial College London Business School, an MPhil in distinction in linguistics from Cambridge, and a first-class BA honors degree in French, German, and Dutch. How many languages do you speak, Rachel? Any more that we're going to uncover? We shall see. Anyway, finally, and I don't think Rachel will know this, but I actually asked Sarah Warby, an ex-colleague of yours, what she thought of you during the time when you worked with her at Sainsbury's. So this is what Sarah had to say. Rachel is an unusual blend of razor sharp, and I mean razor sharp, moves at speed of sound, brain and utter open eyes, open ears, and desire to learn, which gives her enormous humility and adaptability. I'd put Rachel in pretty much any role in my team, hint, hint, and have absolute confidence. But of course, these days, I'd be working for her. So that comment is irrelevant. So there we go. Rachel, absolute pleasure to have you on this morning. Really looking forward to digging in.
Well, thank you, Richie. Brilliant. Sarah's been on the show and she was stellar, and my goodness, she's got good judgment. So here we are. We are in the company of somebody quite special. So Rachel, brilliant to have you on the show. Just to get us started, what's going on in your world? We're just about to go into a bank holiday weekend, which for retail is a thing. Life getting back to normal a bit, maybe? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, well, first of all, I was distracted from the majority of that intro, Richie, because I want to know why you said Morrison's used to be your favourite supermarket, which I think is being a marketeer in a nutshell, right? That I need to know. I need to understand why we've lost your custom.
Oh, I'll definitely pick that up later. That's a lovely question. There we go.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. Really pleased to be here, and very, as always, generous words from Sarah. Bank holiday. So everyone else probably looking forward to a relaxing long weekend, not in retail, not in grocery in the UK. It's one of the biggest weekends of the year. I'm very pleased to see where I'm sitting in the north of England right now. The sun has come out, and hopefully that means customers will be coming out as well and fueling, whatever that means for them, their bank holiday with Morrison's this weekend.
Oh, very cool. Well, look, Rachel, you've clearly got the top job from our perspective in our industry at one of the leading supermarket chains. So tell us a little bit about that. Love to learn a bit about what you're up to and how it feels to be in that position.
Yeah, it is a cliche, but it's a real privilege of a role. And I think what makes it extra special is the fact that the word customer is in that job title, Chief Customer and Marketing Officer. I think first and foremost, my job is to be the voice of the customer inside an organization of 110,000 colleagues, 497 supermarkets, 10 million customers coming through the doors every single week. And that gives me a real mandate for customer across the business. And I've joined a business that is led by a CEO who is also very customer oriented, which makes a huge difference. And I work in an office that's based in a community exactly where our customers would live. And that keeps us very grounded as well. Long gone are my sushi lunches from London, but I feel much more connected to my customer than I ever have before. As you kind of both hinted at, it's been a really tumultuous couple of years, as we all know. I'm not going to dwell on that in life, and the retail sector and grocery retail in particular has had its roller coaster through that. I think that really, I was at Sainsbury's at the time, we went into the first lockdown, and that moment of realizing that what you do is more than just selling beans. It really is keeping people healthy, keeping people fed, and even in the height of the pandemic, being a place of social connectivity for some people who otherwise weren't going to be seeing or speaking to anybody for periods of time. So it really is an honor. The job includes all the things you'd expect a chief marketing officer role to include, but with that extra special mandate for the customer that I really love.
Yeah, and of course now we're going into an inflationary period, which again, sort of, I guess actually it's probably relentless. In fact, my perception of retail is it is utterly relentless. So I'm curious to know, how do you kind of stop to enjoy it? Because it must just go, flash, everything's going flashing past you all the while. How do you enjoy it?
Yeah, well, I think you're either wired for that or you're not. When I worked at Barclays in banking, there was this phenomenon of ISA season. Every time a new ISA season came around, you questioned, am I still up for this? And in retail, the equivalent probably is Christmas. And I think you get to those last few weeks before Christmas and you realize you either hate retail or you hate it, because you're exhausted, you're stressed, everybody else is starting to wind down, you're winding up. And yeah, as I say, either that adrenaline is just really motivating for you and powers you through, and then you have a little crash at the start of January, or it drains you. And for me, I'm very lucky. It energizes me, not to be too sort of philosophical about it, but again, that what's at the center of most people Christmas is, it's getting around a table, enjoying food and drink, whatever that means for you. And Christmas is just one event. There's those events all through the calendar. We just celebrated Ramadan with our colleagues and customers as well. But the role that you play in helping people to make those really special life moments work well. It's simple, but it's powerful.
Richard, let's dig back into the past a little bit and go into the thought that from looking at your first two degrees, linguistics and then language, very much a predominant feature. Was marketing on the cards, or how did that happen?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't on the cards. Truthfully, I was a bit of a SWAT. And I loved school, I loved university. That's why I did 4 years and then a master's. And I think I had pretty much decided that was my bag. Like, I was in my academic bubble, that's where I was going to stay. And all my friends had started moving to London and they were going out to like sticky floored, smelly nightclubs in Clapham every weekend. And I really felt like I was missing out. So I said, I'll go and try that real world, that grubby real world for a bit. I won't like it, and I'll come back to my academic bubble and sign myself up to a life of beans on toast and lectures and dusty libraries. And I went to the corporate world or the business world, and my first job was really an unmitigated disaster. I worked in a recruitment agency in a small business. I wasn't very good at it. I was recruiting into investment banking, and I started on the day that people were queuing up outside Northern Rock to take out their money. And the leader of the business was very inconsistent. So it was a bit of a disaster. And I thought, right, well, I haven't really given it a proper go. So I need to try something else before I go back to academia. And honestly, it's one of those stories of, I had a friend who worked at Barclays. She said, I called her up crying one day, this is terrible. You need to apply to some things, just get the ball rolling. I think our grad scheme closes tomorrow. Send in your CV. And I had to pick a scheme. And obviously it was finance, tax, HR, corporate marketing. And my thought process had to be very, very quick. And it was, well, I like people, so that's probably HR and marketing. And I like language and communicating, so I'll go for marketing. And I'm so glad I did. Obviously, I've absolutely loved my marketing career, but it was as unthought through as that, but paid off.
It's fate. It could have been tax.
It could have been tax, and I wouldn't have been on this show.
Not with Richie and I, anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. Academia is very pure and structured, and marketing career is just completely messy. So, what do you pull through from that academic prowess? Clearly, you're good at academia. What do you pull through into?
It's a very astute point, because what I loved about academia was the learning, the intellectual challenge, and the seminar groups where you're with a group of like-minded people debating ideas, disagreeing with each other, challenging each other's thinking. And what I hated was the time spent alone in a library or at my desk, and the 6 months to write a dissertation. It's not an exaggeration to say that I finished my dissertation 20 minutes before the deadline, having not gone to bed for 2 nights, because I do my best, or certainly used to do my best work under pressure. So really, it was what I really loved about academia was the passion, the knowledge, the learning curve, the curiosity. and the engaging with other people to better myself and challenge myself. And that's what I've had in every job I've done since. I think that's what really is pulled through rather than any of the content of the subject itself.
You know, Rachel, it's interesting, kindred spirits in this respect, because I was clearly forging a life in academia myself. And the thing that then sort of stopped me, the ultimate sort of milestone moment, was the thought of having to, and exactly like yourself, the process to publication effectively taking years, and then the thought that no one in the mainstream world then reads those publications, which is kind of like, well, actually, where's the impact really going to be? And that sort of drew me into a more of real life impact. And I suspect in that sense, you know, similar to yourself. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I do really admire about academia is the rigor with which they come at it. And I find that today marketers more generally don't tend, or very few tend to come at it from a very rigorous perspective. And I just wondered if there is, even in that respect, some learnings to be had from our old world that we could bring into the new. I want to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, really good point. I think rigor, attention to detail, and an effectiveness mindset are things that I value and hold dear, and that I work with any team that I'm part of on. And actually, that's been one of the most encouraging things in my now just over 1 year at Morrison's, really helping to encourage that effectiveness mindset in the team. And when I talk about an effectiveness mindset, I do mean big E. I mean data. I mean, what do we know about how we've done X, it's had Y impact, and therefore we will or won't do it again. I do mean the data-led side. But I also just mean taking the moment, and in an industry like retail that is so fast-paced, you're churning out huge volumes of work and assets every single day. But the ability to take a beat and say, do we know why we're doing this? Do we believe it's the right thing to do? Do we think we did it well? And do we know what impact it had? Is quite a hard moment to carve out of a day or a week or a year in retail, but I think incredibly important. And I think any team that I've worked with would say, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. I would have brought some of that rigor and the demand on that into the work that we do.
Yep, no sloppiness allowed. Now then, you've mentioned Christmas as an epicenter moment for retail. So if you've been there a year, you will have joined, I suppose, just around the time when the thinking was cranking up for Christmas 2021. We've had a couple of equivalent peers. We've had Sherry Crammond on a little while back, gave us a bit of an insight. But what's your take on the Christmas merry-go-round?
I think we have to be realistic and pragmatic and accept that Christmas is Christmas, year in, year out. There's not a huge amount that changes. It's red and it's gold. It's families getting together. It's a delicious meal at the center of the table. It's Santa, it's snow, it's fairy lights. So I spent a lot of time in a proposition role at Sainsbury's, really challenging myself to somehow reinvent Christmas or find a take on Christmas that nobody had ever come up with before. And it, I think, is a bit of a fool's errand. Obviously, the last few years, it's been different, like trying to be relevant to customers and how they were going to be celebrating Christmas over the last few years. And this year will be different again. We know, you talked about inflation, Mark. We know the cost of living crisis is real. I'm seeing that in what customers are telling me today and how they're behaving today. And it's not just the stretch on household budgets right now. It's the anticipation of what more is to come and when it's going to hit. So this year, I would expect many brands to be acknowledging the fact that Christmas isn't going to be this huge splash out affair that it may have been in years gone by. From a merry-go-round perspective, I'm quite lucky, I think, if you're referring to the sort of advertising wars at Christmas. I joined retail actually under Sarah Warby, who Richie mentioned at the start, at a time where she was one of the leaders, I think, who was brave enough to say enough. I think businesses were spending enormous proportion of their annual budgets on Christmas advertising, and it became, for some, I think, a bit of a battle of egos. Who's going to win the awards? Who's going to win the plaudits? Who are the consumer titles going to write about as being the best Christmas ad? Rather than actually just connecting, telling your brand story in a way that's relevant to your customers at Christmas. And actually, I was really thrilled with the Morrison's Christmas campaign in the year just gone, because it did exactly that. It took the brand story we'd started telling in May, put it in a Christmas setting, and resonated with our customers. And when you've got less budget than some of your peers, you've got to spend it very wisely. And I think pivoting to say something different in a different brand world with low attribution at Christmas would have been the wrong choice for us.
I just got, Richie, sorry, I got one follow-up question. It's really interesting what you said. I've never thought about this, but obviously the Byron Sharp and Erebog Bass with laws of growth would say spread your spend very evenly throughout the year, constant top up of, distinctive brand assets and all that, which would discourage you from going on a massive splurge at Christmas. But I hear that retailers make nearly all their profit in November, December. So is it an active conversation about how to balance those two in this world where maybe, people are a bit more pragmatic about things?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, divide it by 12 or 52 and spend the media budget that way. You've got to play to your seasonal spikes in retail. But for me, Christmas in retail starts in September. If you haven't got momentum, you haven't been building equity, building distinctiveness, building awareness, and doing anything that Byron Sharp tells you to do, by the time you've hit September, then you're going to have a really challenging run-in to Christmas. And we know that customers do start subconsciously. People listening to this will probably say, I don't. But, deep down, system 2 thinking, customers do start making their plans for Christmas around September, including where they're going to shop for what.
Brilliant. Rachel, people always say that you learn more from the things that didn't go as well as they could have. And I wondered if there maybe is 1 or 2 moments in your career when things haven't gone your way, and perhaps maybe what are some of the key lessons that you've taken from that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I spent a lot of time talking to people about resilience, and I share my little practical tips on how I cope and how I build my resilience. And I send them off to Harvard Business Review articles or the Calm app. And then I finish with a really unhelpful message, which is, in reality, you build resilience muscle by needing to be resilient. I think that the first for me was that first job that I talked about. I wouldn't say it was a mistake because exactly as you say, I learned so much from it. But going to work somewhere that didn't play to my strengths, I lost my drive. I stopped trying very hard, which was so unfamiliar a territory to me. And where the person who was leading the business was, as I said, very inconsistent. That what it really showed me was nothing. It wasn't a technical skill that I learned, but it was a very, very early in my career grounding in what my values were. And I don't think that I was articulating it as such at the time, but looking back, I can see values of drive, values of fairness, values of courage, values of kindness, and values of integrity and consistency. All were manifesting in the wrong way at that time, and which really affected how then I was behaving and how I was feeling. So it was a mistake, but one that I'm so glad that I made. And then in terms of specific others, that there are loads and some are big and some are small, but I personally find that first big mistake in any job incredibly liberating because, and I'm sure that some people will empathize with this. Somebody once said to me, they gave me the feedback that they were very nice. And then they said, you're a bit of a paranoid overachiever. And I thought it was beautiful, like beautifully articulated. And I think what they meant was things have normally gone reasonably well for you. And you're so scared of something not going well. Is it holding you back? Such powerful feedback. And what I found is every time at any level, I've made a big mistake in a role, I go home, I think the world has ended. I think I'm never going to recover. My reputation is forever sullied. I'm a worthless waste of space. I sleep on it. You go back into work and the world moves on and everything's fine. And that's incredibly liberating because then that gives you the confidence and the courage to be brave, to take risks, to not avoid making more mistakes. And if I was giving anybody at any stage in their career advice, it would be don't make yourself average by being so scared of making mistakes. Because I think if you box yourself into that safe space, back to Byron Sharp, you're not going to have any distinctive assets. You're not going to be known for anything. You've got to be prepared to get some things wrong. Otherwise, you're just going to look like everybody else.
I love that.
So don't be scared, kind of go for it. You talked about your values, drive, fairness, courage, kindness, consistency. And the courage one is the one that's coming through there. So can you tell us a little bit, where we're all a product of our past. Where do you think that courage streak comes from?
Wow. Probably my mum. She was, the woman on the parent at school who would speak up and fight up against things. Well, I would think I was in one of the first years to do SATs in Key Stage 1. And she kept me at home. And the school were not very happy about it because they probably thought I was going to do okay. And also it was setting a bad precedent and all of that. But she thought it was unfair that young children were being put under pressure to make a school look good. And she's not like she's not hippie or anything like that. And she actually, ironically, and she'll hate that I've said this, she actually works in education now, and she's one of the leading child protection experts in the country. So I probably shouldn't be sharing that story. But she had a very strong sense of what was right and wrong, and she fought for it. Or an equivalent is my favorite book of all time is To Kill a Mockingbird. And I read that very young. I think I was 7 or 8 when I read To Kill a Mockingbird. And obviously at the heart of that story is a Black man being falsely accused of the rape of a young white woman in the southern states in America. And she got phone calls from other parents who were angry because I had gone into school talking about this book and this story. And she was sort of fiercely defensive of, she's learning, and it's not about the content. She didn't understand what rape is, but she's learning about, and actually here's where one of the other values come into play. She's learning about fairness and justice and treating people well. And I could probably pick out lots and lots of examples over my life of her being brave. And it's something I've always admired in other people, and frankly have not respected. When I've seen the opposite in people, I've seen them cow down or not stand up for what I know they believe in. I've probably lost some respect for them. People who were senior to me earlier in my career. So I think it's not purely altruistic. I'm not just trying to make the world a better place. I think being brave or having courage can be as simple as early in my career, when I was a very junior campaign manager, sitting around the table with marketing directors and intimidating ad agency folk and not really understanding something. So asking the question. That's brave, because you're speaking up and exposing yourself in front of people who you think know better than you. But that helped me to build relationships. It helped me to build knowledge. It helped me to better understand my craft. And sometimes the questions weren't stupid questions. They were good questions. I think, grounded in the way I was brought up and what was around me, and then what has helped me and fueled me in my career.
Brilliant answer.
Rachel, you talk a lot about values. And I'd love to get a sense of how you hold those values, or the cross-section between your values and the way that you lead your teams. How do they sort of fuse together? And can you always be true to your values in leadership?
Well, definitely not, because you're human. I don't think any human, well, I'd like to meet them, or maybe I should be holding myself to a higher standard, but I don't think I can 100% of the time behave 100% in line with my values. And I am also a pragmatist. I have those values, but I am a pragmatist, and working in big businesses and big corporate roles means sometimes you have to do things like let people go. And that might not seem very kind, but ultimately I would probably reconcile myself in that, and thinking, if this place isn't right for them, they're not thriving here, it's not going to be enjoyable for them, they're not ultimately going to succeed. It's kinder to be honest with them and help them transition to what's next than it is to string them along or make them suffer over the long term. So, that's just one example. In terms of how I lead, I think my style is high energy, high challenge, high support. And I think that's pretty consistent with, probably, I would hope, with my values. On a good day, that means I'm full of beans. I really want to work well with people on things. I want us to do better and better. I'm constantly pushing and striving for more, but I'm doing it in a sort of, I hope, positively provocative way. And I am there to support. And that is in the work itself. That is personally. I do bring a lot of my personality to work, a lot of my real self to work, day in, day out. I don't subscribe to the we should bring our whole selves to work philosophy. I believe that we should bring as much of ourselves to work as we can and want to at that time. I've gone through some times in my life that were very, very challenging, and bringing my full self to work would have meant like sitting at my desk and crying from the start of the day to the end of the day. And that wouldn't have been good for anybody else. And it wouldn't have been good for me. You know, work was my positive distraction in those times. But I do feel like you should feel able to bring as much of yourself as you want to work day in, day out. I care about my team's lives. I know what their kids are called. I tell them what I'm doing at the weekend. And I think that creates a real sense of team and partnership. But then on a bad day, or at its extreme, all of that can be quite intense. You know, that energy and that challenge can be intense. It could be overwhelming. And because coupled with the sort of intellectual curiosity, I have to work quite hard to draw a line on when am I pushing for more or wanting to know more or asking a question because it's really going to get us to a better outcome versus I just would quite like to know the answer. And I find that one probably the hardest to manage day in, day out. Yeah,
it's getting that balance. I mean, impossible, in fact, sometimes. But you mentioned missing people. I'm curious to see where that fits in. What was the genesis of that, and why do you do it, and what do you get from it? Yeah,
so I think I started working with missing people 4.5 years ago. Wonderful organisation. I would describe them as like a challenger brand. So they punch way above their weight. They're relatively small, and the impact they have across the UK is huge. And what makes the mission particularly challenging is they are there to support the people who go missing and the people who are left behind. And the two things aren't always aligned. You know, unfortunately, sometimes people want to be missing. And the charity has an obligation to protect the people who have gone missing if they don't want to be found. But clearly then there are people left at home who are in deep despair. And as well as emotional support and practical support like searches for missing people, there's huge challenges for families or people left behind with practicalities like somebody who's been missing for a very long time and how you actually eventually access things like their finances. There's been a lot of campaigning to change the law on that. The Missing People has been really instrumental in. So phenomenal charity with some fantastic people. I got into it, again, it is one of those serendipity stories, and I do, like, luck and serendipity has been a huge part of my career journey, but I do believe you've got to kind of make and take opportunity. You've got to put yourself in the way of luck and serendipity. You can't just expect it to come knocking on the door. So I've been on holiday in Sri Lanka on, I think it was New Year's Eve, doing the classic cheesy, what will next year bring for me? I was sipping a pina colada on a beach somewhere. And I just thought, you know what, I think I was at Sainsbury's at the time. It'd be good to get to try and add some value somewhere else and challenge myself in a different environment and give back a little bit. And being a trustee felt like a good idea. And I knew that I would want to work in an area that was somehow linked to mental health. I'm very, obviously, I believe most of us are now, but very passionate about better understanding and supporting people with mental health challenges, be that on a given day or in a given decade. And at the same time, I was having this reflection. Somebody I'd known, again, who I'd met through luck earlier in my career, had messaged me, and she was the chair of Missing People, and said, I'm going to be looking for some new trustees. Do you know anybody, or ... would you be interested? And so I found out a bit more about the charity. I love that challenger brand status, and of course, mental health is one of the key reasons why people go missing in the first place. So I went through the process with Missing People and was offered the role, and it's been fantastic. It's very grounding. We open every single board meeting, a trustee meeting, with what we call a grounded moment, which is a member of the team coming to talk to us about a specific case from the previous months, or sometimes even an affected person, so a family member of perhaps someone who's gone missing, coming to talk to us. And yeah, you realise, without sounding too sort of cliched about it, I might complain about my budget sometimes or my resource, but I'm so flush with resource and opportunity, and when it comes down to it, I am selling beans. And then you have this team of people who have a fraction, a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the resource, human or otherwise, to deploy, and the impact they're having is genuinely life changing. So it's a real privilege, and I learn so much from the executive team at Missing People every single time I talk to them.
It sounds like a really inspiring sort of place to be, and such an impactful work. I'd never given it as much thought, and I can just conceptually understand how important it is, quite frankly, on both sides of the coin. So it's fantastic. Rachel, turning the coin a little bit, you clearly, a common strand through everything that you seem to do is this theme around learning, constant development. You talked about sense of curiosity. And I wondered to what extent you feel that mentoring then has a role to play across that, either you mentoring others or perhaps in your early days, others mentoring you.
Yeah, absolutely critical, I think. And I would say actually, mentoring is probably having more of an impact on me now, more as I'm more senior in my career than it even did in the early days, because the more senior you get, the lonelier it gets. The smaller your peer group gets. And in the role I am now, there is only me who has my job around the executive table. There is, by definition, there isn't a like-minded person or a person who's been there and done it and can give me their perspective. And so whilst I don't have an official single mentor right now, I have, whether they like it or not, I guess, amassed a collection of mentory people over my career, people I've worked for, worked with, people who've mentored me in the past, people I've been introduced to and just connected with. And I think subconsciously, I know when I've got something on my mind, I know who to go to about what. And if you ask me to kind of draw that down, I would really struggle, but intuitively, because of how well I know these people now, I know who to draw on when I need help with what. I think mentoring is incredibly important. I think it doesn't work when it's, I'm trying to develop, I want to progress. My boss says I should get a mentor, I'll go and get a mentor. I'm pretty strict with my mentees. I say, well, hang on, what do you want mentoring in? Because I might not be the right mentor for what you want to be mentored on or about. And I will, if it's not me, I won't just say, sorry, I'll rack my brain. Who do I think can help you? And I also am clear on, if it goes well, you need to dump me in a few months' time, because we should get to the end of that mentoring journey. You should have made the progress. I should have helped you to make the progress you were looking to make. And then you're on to the next challenge, and another mentor will be right for that next challenge or that next opportunity. So I think be thoughtful with it would be my advice to anybody who is looking for a mentor. And if you're mentoring, don't be offended if you get dumped, because I think it kind of means you've done your job well. And then mentoring and my mentees, you learn as much from your mentees as you do your mentors, partly because they ask you questions that you probably haven't asked yourself for a while. And it's good, much like this conversation, it's good to force that reflection and that self-awareness. And then one of the most rewarding things I've done is some reverse mentoring with an Asian store manager at Sainsbury's. And I'm actually in the process of looking for a similar relationship at Morrison's. And that reverse mentoring, just a store manager, like how important for me as somebody who is kind of responsible for getting it right for customers to have somebody who is seeing tens of thousands of customers come in and out the doors each week, is talking to them, who has colleagues who work in the shop who are also your customers and aren't in your ivory tower and can tell you it exactly as it is. So I learned a lot in that substantive sense. And then also, as I've really tried to build my own understanding, awareness, and skill, I guess, in becoming more inclusive, becoming more representative as a person, as a leader, and as a brand. Then having that connection with, and this is, as I said, an Asian store manager who could help me to better understand Asian colleagues, Asian customers. The way the brand was presenting itself was, again, very, very powerful. So I think that reverse mentoring, whatever it means for you, that reverse mentoring opportunity is a rich vein to explore.
Yeah, very good, very powerful. And I think reverse mentoring is quite in vogue, and that's a great thing. I'm just going to say out loud that when you talked about the grounded moments at Missing People, I had sort of a few hairs on the back of my neck. And I think that's going to be one of my key takeaways, that I think I can probably use that in a couple of places I show up. So that's awesome. Just continue on the learning theme. So clearly very important to you. What do you think you're still learning or have yet to learn?
Loads. But technically, right? Isn't it one of the best things about our industry that it's constantly, there's something new coming up and it's changing? And part of what you have to learn is whether it's a fad or it's fundamentally going to change the way that customers live their lives, or you are going to communicate with or impact or influence your customers. But, you know, when I started out and did some social media marketing, the brief was buy 1 million Facebook likes. And like, you know, look how far we've come. So technically, and particularly in the area of technology, I've still got loads to learn. But I think the learning journey that continues is as a leader. And as a leader, you lead bigger teams, you lead broader teams, you lead people who've got way more experience in their functional discipline than you might have as their leader. You're leading in different contexts, and you're leading through, I guess, your own personal changing contexts as well. I haven't yet led a team. I don't have children yet. I haven't led as a parent. I haven't challenged myself as a leader when I can't empathize with my customers. You know, one of the things I've loved in my career so far is I have been a customer of every brand I've worked for. Even actually back to that recruitment agency, because I went to them as a candidate looking for a job. So if I were to go and work for a luxury car brand, that would be a real struggle for me because I wouldn't know how to be my own customer. So I think there's always learning. And I think for me at this stage in my career, that there'll always be new technical skills I need to learn. There'll always be a new innovation I need to get my head around. But really, I'm just learning more and more about myself and the impact I have, and when it's at its best and when it's not, and how I can finesse and fine tune that. But I don't think you're ever the finished article.
It's one of the things that really have stayed with me is your thought about the concept of reverse mentoring, and the fact that, you know, you're proactively reaching out to get to sort of the ground level to really understand what and empathize with what your employees are going through, but also then what your customers are, through that example of that Asian store manager. Clearly in our industry today, it feels like there is a big issue when it comes to things like inclusion and diversity. And Morrison as a brand is probably one of the most well represented in all of the country. And I'm sure the communities in which you serve are far and vast and wide. You know, you alluded to the fact that you even celebrated Ramadan recently with your customers. And I'd just like to get a sense of how you foster that inclusion and diversity into the marketing function, and what do you think the importance of it is?
I think I believe in being inclusive and being representative because I just deep down believe it is the right thing to do. There is a moral and ethical imperative there for me, without doubt. Put that to one side and put on a very pure commercial hat. It just makes commercial sense. You know, Morrison's, Sainsbury's, Barclays, they are businesses that anybody has the right to walk through your front doors and be served. And we are going to win by growing our share of wallet with as many customers as possible, getting more customers shopping with us more often. And if you're not reflecting in your range, in your advertising, in your colleague base, if you're not reflecting modern Britain, then you're not set up to serve your customers, and people will go and shop somewhere else. So I think, you know, I've spent time talking to colleagues across the industry who have really struggled to, perhaps in more traditional brands or in luxury brands, they have struggled to convince colleagues around the board table that reflecting different types of customers is the right thing to do. But I haven't got any excuse, because anybody and everybody is my customer. And so I should be making sure that they feel welcome, understood, one customer to the next, irrespective of how they look or what festivals they celebrate.
Very true. We ask a question quite often of our guests. This is the School of Marketing is to help people from all walks of life to get into the marketing industry and thrive, with a particular focus on apprenticeships. But you've plotted your way through your career. From what you've learned, what advice would you give to people just at the beginning or thinking about careers in marketing?
Yeah, a very practical one. If you're going for an interview for a brand that you could be a customer of, go and be a customer of it first. If somebody came in to interview with me and I asked them, so what's your favorite Morrison's product, or what did you notice when you were in a shop last, and it was evident that they hadn't been in, then I'm thinking you're not actually that interested in working here, and you're not that interested in how people make buying decisions, which is fundamental to the role. So that's a practical tip. I think I talked about bravery, and bravery doesn't have to be, standing up on stage and saying something really outstandingly unpopular that is going to divide the nation. It can be putting your hand up to ask the question, to seek to understand something more, to be prepared to share a different point of view to somebody else. I think don't be afraid to work hard. And I say that, working hard, I think, has sort of become a bit unfashionable as a turn of phrase. I don't mean presenteeism. I don't mean sell your soul to the corporate devil, be working from dawn till dusk 7 days a week, but be prepared to take on that side of desk project, because it's going to connect you to a new stakeholder, or help you learn something that you didn't know before, or help you do something in your core role a bit differently because of what you've learned. Be brave in taking side steps or taking roles in different parts of the business. The time I spent in commercial at Sainsbury's has made me a much better marketeer. It's made me a much more credible marketeer with my commercial colleagues, and it's made me a much better executive leader, because I can hold my own around a board table talking about performance in the last 4 weeks. Enjoy it. It is fun. What we get to spend time thinking about people and why they do what they do, and we get to talk to them about that, and it's never dry. So enjoy it. And I think that would be my biggest tips. Just persevere. Don't get knocked back when you get knocked back. Just bounce back as quick as you can and as high as you can, and keep learning.
I love it. I'm gonna pitch up the last question here, because we're unfortunately short of time. So life usually goes full circle, and I just wondered, do you ever think that you'll return to academia?
Oh, I haven't ruled it out. I definitely haven't ruled it out. Look, I did when I did the MBA. Part of that was, it'd be really good for my CV capital. I'm trying to broaden myself as not just a marketeer, but a business leader, and it will give me the skills that I need. And part of it was just, exams. I love exams. So I haven't ruled it out. I don't think it's on the cards right now, and I get my learning in other ways. In my time off between Sainsbury's and Morrison's for my sins, I went and did a finance for non-finance execs course, and went through all the same emotional roller coaster of being back at uni and panicking that I hadn't done my homework in time. But I definitely could see myself in a future year when I'm putting out the deck chair, relaxing and looking for something to do. I'm sure I'll reconsider it, but I think it'll be on a completely different topic. I'm weirdly into the Tudors, so I'll go and do some medieval history course or something. Very cool. Well, I'm surprised you don't have time to write papers and do publications in and around your day job. Crazy, but there you go. Look, what a wonderful session we've had. What a lovely chat, and so insightful. So just for me to say a massive thank you, Rachel. It's been unbelievable to have you on the show this morning. It's been absolutely brilliant. I'm gonna pass over to Mark for some of his reflections, but just from me, a very warm thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, just on that last answer, I love exams. I'm just holding that.
No, what have I done?
No. I'm holding that in juxtaposition with my son, who's got his first GCSE exam today. And those aren't the words he exactly uses as it relates to exams. But anyway, that's a different story. Rachel, it's been wonderful to have you on. So many pearls of wisdom. Not to skip over, just at the very beginning, you talked about my role is to represent the customer into the organization. And I think that starts me off on a road of you're very clear thinking. You're a very clear thinking person. The clarity of thought, simplifying. So that was great. Also a sense of service. So, our purpose at Christmas time, tuning into what's important to people. So that customer orientation. But the thing that really stands out was the moment when you talked about your mum and her courage and bravery. And I love the fact that somebody who didn't do their first SATs went on to get 3 degrees. Again, lovely juxtaposition. But that was part of your values: drive, fairness, courage, kindness, and consistency. And I think they really shone through. Really interesting thoughts about mentoring, particularly around reverse mentoring. And I loved your take on, as a leader, high energy, high challenge, high support. So probably not for the fearless, but I suspect you really do get the best out of your people. You make your own luck, for sure. It was Jack Nicklaus, wasn't he, who said, people say I'm lucky, but the more I practice, the luckier I seem to get. Funny, isn't it? Positively provocative. I think that's a really good summary, actually, of you as a leader and you as a marketer. It's been fabulous to have you on. And I know that everyone will get so many insights and wisdom from it. So thank you very much for your time, and good luck through the retailing haze of the bank holiday weekend.
Thank you.